I stumbled into this story almost by accident. A few years ago, I was going through a difficult time. I had lost my father, was losing my mother. We dropped our children off at college. Suddenly my marriage needs to be renegotiated and my friendships remade. And I walked back into our home and I felt homesick. And at first I thought, you can't have this feeling, like that's what children have. But then I realized it was not just me, that everybody I know was feeling sort of disconnected and off track and off kilter in some way. Everyone's leaving jobs and losing relationships and Googling strange diseases and kind of feeling like we've abdicated our relationships for our smartphones in a lot of ways. Like everybody is experiencing a kind of existential homesickness. And that's when I realized that I wanted a way to reconnect, right? To remake all of these things and kind of to restitch all of the bonds in my life. And I thought, oh, I need a ritual. Rituals are one of the few things that we know work to hold us together. A ritual is a shared, unnecessary act that makes us feel at home. It's shared because it connects us with other people. It's unnecessary because you don't need to get down on one knee to propose or wear black to mourn, but yet these unnecessities become necessary to give us meaning. And then also, they make us feel at home. We know that rituals started 300,000 years ago, and we know now with neuroscience that they calm us when we're stressed and help us navigate difficult times. And we have done them in every century we've ever known until this century when we are turning our backs on traditional life rituals. Birth rituals are plummeting. The same with coming of age rituals. Fewer than half of us are married. Only 1 in 3 of us is buried. Like, this was shocking to me. In 1970, 5% of Americans were cremated. Now it's 65%, and nearly half of those have no ritual of any kind to mark their deaths. And yet, at the same time that we are in this sort of recession, as I call it, of traditional life rituals, these non-traditional ways of gathering are just exploding all over the world. Gender reveals and NICU graduations and cancerversaries and soberversaries and end-of-life doulas and end-of-company doulas and on and on and on. Pet funerals are a $3 billion business. Mom proms, daddy-daughter dances. And a lot of these are marking occasions that organized institutions never recognize. So not just marriage, but divorce, not just fertility, but infertility, not just birth, but stillbirth. And what we are seeing is that this movement in the rise of what I call new rituals, the ritual renaissance, as I call it, in A Time to Gather, really dovetails with the rise of the experience economy. And it shows something that people, I think, are not talking anywhere near enough about, which is that there is going to be a human response to this digital saturation and tech overload, and certainly the rise of AI. This is sort of like humans pushing back and I think making the first serious dent on the loneliness epidemic that we've been talking about almost for a generation now. I think what's important here is that there are technical differences, right? So a habit is something you do every day, a tradition is something that may be passed down in your family, whereas a ritual is really a collective act. And at the beginning of this journey, I was very, very interested in the definition of ritual. There are civic rituals like coronations and inaugurations, right? There are calendric rituals like Thanksgiving or, midsummer. And then there are daily rituals like shaking hands or bowing. But what I've come to think and really feel quite strongly is that we have to get rid of these definitions that arose a century ago when anthropologists first started identifying life rituals and really start focusing on what I call a ritual state of mind. When the enemy is in our pocket, when we have outsourced ourselves to algorithms that we know are designed to divide us, the only thing strong enough to hold us together is the original human algorithm, and that's ritual human gatherings. As you know, I spent the last 10 years collecting and analyzing more than 500 life stories of Americans of all ages, walks of life, and all backgrounds. And what I determined is that the linear life is dead. The idea that we're going to have one job and one relationship and one belief system and one home and one political belief from adolescence to assisted living, like that's deader than ever before. Instead, we live nonlinear lives. And my data show that we go through 3 to 5 what I call life quakes in the course of our lives. These are massive bursts of change that often have pain and confusion, but ultimately lead to growth and renewal. You think we have 3 to 5, the average length of them is 5 years. So if you think 3 to 5, 4, 5, 6 years, that's 25 years. That's half of our adult lives we spend in transition. And what I discovered in doing the research for A Time to Gather is that collective ceremonial life occasions, these ritual gatherings, this is how we navigate those times. And so we need them more frequently. And so people are saying, forget the top-down, institutionally mandated, prescripted rituals I grew up with. As one millennial ritual designer told me, I need a ritual when I want it. I don't need anyone's approval. And if I'm having a bad day, I'm losing my job, I'm moving, okay, I'm having a double mastectomy, I want to be surrounded by my friends. And so the change is that we have moved from top-down rituals to bottom-up rituals. And what's so powerful about what's going on is that it is an entirely organic grassroots movement. And to me, it dovetails entirely what we are seeing across the American economy. People want to gather together. The experience economy is now a $10 trillion business. That is a third of the $30 trillion US economy. Every aspect of the economy is affected by this. Every neighborhood is affected by this. Every family is affected by this. I would point to 2 rituals that really sort of opened my eyes for the opportunity that we have now to rewrite the rules of how we live and to push back on loneliness and division and digital saturation and try to find meaning collectively. One is my wife's favorite chapter in this book, the Taylor Swift divorce party. This is a woman who grew up on Long Island. Both her parents were divorced. Both of her grandparents were divorced. Her number one life goal was not to get divorced. She grows up, she gets married, she has 2 children, she gets divorced. Her husband takes half her belongings, she gives away the other half, she comes back and she realizes, oh my God, you know what I need right now? I need a divorce registry. I have no sheets to sleep on, I have no towels to dry on. She starts a company, the world's first divorce registry, it takes off, and then she realizes it's not just enough to have this registry, I want to be surrounded by my friends. And they are saying like, what can I do to help? And she doesn't know what to do to help. And so she writes a blog post about the Taylor Swift divorce party. We all know Taylor Swift is the queen of breakup songs, and it's like shake it off cupcakes and we are never, ever, ever getting back together napkins. And this thing goes viral. But then on the other side, and this is something that has just completely not been reported in the larger conversation, this is also happening among men. I encountered this subculture I'd never heard of called misogi. Okay, misogi is a Japanese medieval ritual of jumping into cold waterfalls. This gets embraced by the manosphere. And now we have this huge culture among young men who do these things called misogi, which are popularly known as sufferfests, where once a year you're going to do something like swim with sharks. People are saying, I want connection. I want collective meaning. I want a sense of belonging. And step by step, gathering by gathering, they are pushing back on contemporary life and saying, we want to take back our family, our team, our neighborhood, our corporation, coming to say, do a ritual with us. I think of myself as a writer, but I've now become a ritual designer because there is so much untapped desire out there. Arnold van Gennep was an anthropologist who in 1909 coined the phrase rite of passage. And what he said in his original book was that there were 4 major rites of passage: birth, coming of age, marriage, and death. If you choose not to get married or have children, as many people do, that means for most of your adult life, you do not have a pre-approved life ritual. And what I've learned is that in the nonlinear lives we have today, we all have our own idiosyncratic fingerprint of loops and whirls and twists and turns that we experience. And rituals at their core are solutions to the feeling of being unsettled, unsure, afraid, and just fearful that we have during those times. So the reality is, it's not that people are saying, I want to create more rituals. It's that what people are saying is, I'm going through more and more times when I feel I need the connection, wisdom, strength, advice, celebration, or shared mourning of being with other people. So in that instance, because there are so many more times, I do not think that there is a scenario under which we have too many life rituals. So in a world in which the newest algorithms are designed to divide us, the only algorithm strong enough to help us stay together is this type of gathering. And the thing about it is, some of these might go nowhere. Some of these might become traditions that you do every year. Some of them might become something that happens on your corporate retreat every year, precisely because it's unnecessary and a little discretionary. And as a result, we know from a lot of studies that the more you invest in something, both time, money, effort, and emotional commitment, the more you're going to get out of it. So in a world in which it's just too easy to retreat into our screens, what we're seeing is there's going to be a human response. If you pull back and look at the history of the United States, and in particular the history of the American economy, in the last 25 years of the 19th century, in the Industrial Revolution, a third of Americans lost their jobs and moved from rural areas to cities. That's 25 million people. And at the same time, 25 million more people emigrated, mostly from Europe, also arriving in major cities in this country. And if you look at a lot of the backbone of what people today think of as the ritual calendar, Thanksgiving was popularized in this time. Wedding showers, registries, an entire ecosystem arose during wedding photography. All of these kinds of things were invented. Baby showers, on and on and on. I could just cite them. What's going on? There was dislocation. There was a human response to the dislocation. And what was created was entirely new way. So Rotary Club, cultural affinities from the places people left behind, whether it was rural areas or the European cultures where they came from. And even if a fraction of what we're told is going to happen with AI, and the fraction of the kind of job loss and dislocation, there is going to be a massive hole, but also a massive opportunity. And there will be a human response, and a massive part of that will be face-to-face human gatherings. I've now spent 10 years talking about how individuals, groups, teams, and especially leaders respond to times of transition and change. And I think that there's a couple of takeaways that I have. Number one, we have to normalize change. The essential way to frame this is that how we look at the world affects how we look at our lives and the groups that make up our lives. So in the ancient world, they didn't have linear time. They thought that life and time worked in a cycle, okay? It was the Industrial Revolution that introduces the idea of linear time. So what's going on in the Industrial Revolution? You have factories, you have conveyor belts, you have assembly lines. So all through the 20th century, the great ideas were linear constructs. Okay, you've got Freud with psychosexual stages. You have Piaget with childhood development stages. You have Erikson with the 8 stages of moral development. You have the hero's journey, the 5 stages of grief. These are all linear constructs because that's how we understand the world. Now we've changed how we understand the world and the economy. We know we lived in a webbed, networked, interconnected economy and global society where change comes at us from all times. Where we've neglected to realize to take that onto our own lives and realize that we also spend half of our adult lives in periods of transition or change, and also for our organizations. So the first most important thing to do is to realize that you can use this language, so that leaders who use language that talk about this change are normalizing it. So the way we've talked about change for almost a generation right now is that it's an aberration, and that we have to grit and grind and resilience our way through. That normalizes the stable times and stigmatizes the unstable times. We have to flip that. We have to say that change is just as normal as stability, and therefore change is to be expected. Number two, we have to say in these times that we're all not going to worry and be fearful and stress about it in an isolated way. Okay, if you go back to before the pandemic, the whole department in a corporation that was designed to deal with employee mental health, instability, how are we functioning today? That was in the basement in a windowless room next to the incinerator. Now, in every corporation, in the last 5 years alone, has elevated this to a much more regular part and made it part of every conversation. Because if you don't make time for this conversation, it will take over every conversation. But in fact, it can't take over every conversation because the business still needs to function. So number one, top-down leadership. Number two, normalize times of change and find ways to experience it. And then number three, focus on the culture of the group. Every community, every team has a group keeper. And what I have been able to identify, and what I've been thinking about almost exclusively now for 3 years, is that there is a kind of formula, an easy to understand way how to make gatherings that work. Rituals do connect us, but a huge part of the ritual, the purpose of it, is to modulate the conflict, is to get it out into the open. The purpose of the ritual is to resolve the conflict, get it onto the table. And what these group experiences, what the rituals we do on retreat, what the rituals we do in our team meetings, the way we communicate a group, it is putting front and center, the group is important. And as much time as we spent on our personal care, we have to spend just as much on the care of the group. Top-down leadership, change is normal, spend time focusing on the health of the group. I think the number one thing that surprised me while working on A Time to Gather is the universality of the way successful gatherings unfold and how people think about them, plan them, and experience them. I was in South Africa at a traditional bride price negotiation, 17 years to talk about the financial transfer between two families, ending with a traditional wedding and what they called a white wedding, a Western wedding, on the same day. And that day began with the family waking up, taking a home-brewed beer and pouring it as an honor to the ancestors at the base of a tree. 6 months later, I was in Chile in the Andes Mountains, visiting the Mapuche tribe and a traditional healer. And before he welcomed me into a sacred space to have this conversation about rituals, he took a home-brewed beer and poured it at the base of a tree. These things were not planned. The internet did not communicate this idea. This has happened before, a universal idea. It's a reminder that through the internet, we have access to so many different cultures. So what I tried to do in the book is to gather and sort of promulgate what I call a kind of universal blueprint of human togetherness. Like, these are the 5 things you need to do to have a successful gathering yourself. And the fact that that is universal, from weddings to funerals, from mom proms to pet funerals, is a reminder that this is the oldest thing that we've ever done. This was the original algorithm that made us human, and we can be human again by returning to what we know has worked for 300,000 years before we were anatomical humans. Everybody is feeling a kind of existential homesickness. We have been yanked from the basic feeling of being safe and secure and together with belonging and purpose and meaning in our lives that comes from being around other people. This is the universal feeling, and this is the moment that we all have to meet. So what I'd like to do, in drawing from the experience that I've had of traveling around the world for 3 years, going to events in every imaginable corner of the world, from the major capitals of Rome and Paris and New York to the most isolated islands on the planet, Easter Island, in the middle of the Pacific, is that there is a craving now to turn back from our screens and reestablish the elemental part of being human. And that is gathering together in times of change to meet the moment with purpose and connection. So if you come on this journey with me, you're going to see some incredible places. You're going to attend some remarkable rituals that will blow your mind. You're going to meet a lot of ritual designers who think about this. and you're going to say, you know what I want? The number one reaction people have had to this book now is, I want to have a gathering. I want to invite people over. I want to do it for a joyful occasion, like a graduation or a wedding or a baby naming, or a mournful occasion, the loss of a job, the loss of a loved one, the loss of a pet. There are 3 million opportunities every day in this country and 50 million around the world every single day to restitch the world, remake the connections, and strengthen the backbone of what it means to be alive. If we take those opportunities, we can make ourselves happier and everyone in the groups, neighborhoods, businesses, and teams that we're on happier too. We can remake the world.